The dining room was warm and full of laughter. Golden light from the chandelier fell across the long Thanksgiving table. Turkey, mashed potatoes, and fresh bread filled the air with a rich, comforting smell. Sarah Mitchell sat quietly beside her 8-year-old son, Ethan, watching him smile as he reached for another roll. She had been nervous all week about this dinner. She always was. Every year, she hoped this Thanksgiving would be different. Every year, it was and single quotes T. At the head of the table sat Linda Mitchell, her mother-in-law. Linda wore a deep red dress and pearl earrings, and she smiled warmly at every guest, except Sarah. Sarah had learned a long time ago that Linda's smiles were rarely for her, David. Sarah's husband sat across the table, laughing with his brother about an old football game. He looked relaxed, happy. Sarah wished she felt the same. "Ethan, sweetie, can you pass the gravy?" Linda asked sweetly, her eyes fixed on the boy. Ethan smiled and reached for the old silver gravy boat sitting near the center of the table. It was heavy, an antique that had belonged to Linda's grandmother. Sarah noticed his small hands struggling with the weight. But before she could reach out to help, it happened. The gravy boat slipped. It tipped over, spilling warm brown gravy across the white tablecloth, some of it splashing onto Linda's red dress. For a moment, the room went silent. Then Linda's face changed. The warmth disappeared in an instant, replaced by something cold and sharp. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted, standing up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Ethan froze, his eyes wide with fear. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean. Sorry doesn't fix my grandmother's gravy boat." Linda's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Every relative at the table turned to stare. Someone's fork clattered onto a plate. Sarah's heart pounded. She reached for Ethan's hand under the table, but it was too late to stop what came next. "You are always careless, just like your mother." Linda pointed a shaking finger at Sarah, then turned back to Ethan, her voice rising even louder. "Get out! Get out of my house right now." The words hit the room like a slap. Ethan's lower lip trembled. Tears filled his eyes. Sarah's whole body went cold. For 1 second, she couldn't move. She looked at David, silently begging him to say something, anything, to defend their son. But David just sat there, his jaw tight, his eyes down at his plate. He said nothing. That silence hurt more than Linda's shouting. Sarah stood up slowly. She kept her voice calm, even though her hands were shaking. "It's okay, baby. Accidents happen. Let's go wash up." She wrapped her arm around Ethan's shoulders and guided him away from the table, away from his grandmother's furious eyes, away from the silence of his own father. As they reached the doorway, Sarah glanced back, not at Linda's face, but at her hands. Linda was quickly sliding something off the side table into a folder of papers. Sarah couldn't see what they said, but she saw enough to know they were important, legal-looking, official. Linda caught her looking. For just a second, her angry expression shifted into something else, a small, satisfied smile, gone as quickly as it appeared. Sarah's stomach tightened. Something about that smile felt wrong. It felt like Linda had been waiting for a reason, any reason, to make a scene tonight. In the hallway bathroom, Sarah knelt down in front of Ethan, wiping his tears with a paper towel. "Am I in trouble, Mommy?" he whispered. Double quotes, "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. It was an accident." Sarah forced a smile, even though her heart was breaking. "Grandma just. She gets upset sometimes. It's not your fault." But even as she said the words, doubt crept into her mind. This wasn't just Linda getting upset. This felt different, bigger, like something had been building for a long time. And tonight was only the beginning. When they returned to the dining room, the table had gone quiet. Guests avoided Sarah's eyes, pretending to focus on their plates. David finally stood up, walking over to her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "She didn't mean it. She's just stressed with hosting." Sarah looked at him, searching his face for the husband who used to stand up for her. "David," she screamed at our son. She told him to get out. "I know." "I'll talk to her," he said, but his eyes drifted away as he spoke, avoiding hers. Sarah nodded, even though nothing about tonight felt resolved. She helped Ethan into his coat, said quick goodbyes to the family members who dared to make eye contact, and walked out into the cold November night as they drove home in silence. Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from crying. Sarah stared out the window, replaying the scene over and over. The gravy boat, Linda's scream, David's silence, and that strange, satisfied smile. She didn't know it yet, but that smile was about to change everything. Linda wasn't just angry about a gravy boat. She was making a decision, one that would try to erase Sarah and Ethan from the family forever. And Sarah had no idea the fight was only just beginning. 3 days passed before Sarah found the courage to bring it up again. Ethan had gone quiet since Thanksgiving. He didn't ask to visit Grandma's house anymore. He didn't even ask about the cousins he used to play with. He just stayed in his room, drawing pictures of dinosaurs, pretending everything was fine. Sarah couldn't pretend the same way. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, she sat down with David in the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. "We need to talk about what happened," she said softly. David rubbed his eyes, tired from work. "Sarah, I already told you." She was stressed. Hosting 15 people isn't easy for her. She screamed at our son, David. She told him to get out of the house. "I know what she said." His voice was sharper now. "But you weren't raised in that house." "My mother has always been intense. It's just how she is." Sarah felt something twist in her chest. Intense is not an excuse to make an 8-year-old cry. David sighed and looked away, the same way he had looked away at the dinner table. "I'll talk to her. I promise." But Sarah had heard that promise before. Somehow, it never turned into anything more than silence. The next morning, Sarah's phone buzzed while she was making Ethan's lunch. It was a message from Katie, David's cousin, someone Sarah had always liked. They didn't talk often, but Katie's message made Sarah's hands go still. "Hey Sarah, I probably shouldn't say anything, but I think you should know what Aunt Linda has been telling people." Sarah's throat tightened as she typed back. "What do you mean?" "She's been telling everyone in the family group chat that Ethan is out of control and that you don't discipline him properly. She said some other things too, about you not really fitting into the family." "I'm sorry. I just thought you should know." Sarah stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She hadn't been added to that group chat in over a year. She had assumed it simply wasn't very active. Now she understood she had been quietly removed, and no one had told her. She scrolled through old messages Katie forwarded. Linda's words were sharp and calculated. "I love my grandson, but someone needs to teach that boy some manners. It's clear Sarah doesn't know how to handle him." Another message read, "David married outside the family's expectations. I've tried to be patient, but some things just aren't a good fit." Sarah felt sick. This wasn't just anger from one bad night. This was something Linda had been building for a long time, brick by brick, message by message, turning the family against her one conversation at a time. She thought about the folder Linda had slipped away that night at dinner, the papers, the strange smile. Sarah had tried to convince herself she was imagining things. Now she wasn't so sure. That afternoon, Sarah picked up Ethan from school. He climbed into the car quietly, buckling his seatbelt without a word. "How was your day, buddy?" Sarah asked, trying to sound cheerful. Ethan shrugged. "Fine." Then, after a pause, he added, "Cousin Tyler said Grandma doesn't want us at Christmas this year." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What did Tyler say exactly?" "He said Grandma told his mom that we're not really part of the family." "Because you're not a real Mitchell." Ethan looked down at his hands. "Is that true, Mommy? Are we not real family?" Sarah pulled the car over, unable to focus on driving. She turned to face her son, her heart breaking at the confusion in his eyes. "Ethan, listen to me. You are 100% a Mitchell. You are my son, and you are Daddy's son, and nothing anyone says can change that. Do you understand? Ethan nodded slowly, but Sarah could see the doubt still sitting in his small shoulders. Words like that were hard to erase once they had been planted. That night, after finally getting Ethan to sleep, Sarah sat alone in the living room, replaying everything. The scream at dinner, the folder of papers, the secret messages, Ethan's quiet, hurting question. It was all connected somehow. Even if she couldn't see the full picture yet, her phone rang just after 9 o'clock. The number was unfamiliar, a local law office. Sarah almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Hello, is this Sarah Mitchell? A woman's voice asked. Double quotes, yes, this is her. I'm calling from Whitfield and Associates. We're just confirming your mailing address for some upcoming trust paperwork. We want to make sure the documents reach you correctly. Sarah frowned. I'm sorry, what trust paperwork? I haven't signed up for anything. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that told Sarah the woman was checking her notes. I apologize for the confusion. This is regarding the Mitchell Family Trust. Mrs. Linda Mitchell listed you as a party who needs formal notice of recent changes. Sarah's stomach dropped. Recent changes? What changes? I'm not able to share the details over the phone, ma'am. You'll receive an official notice in the mail within the next 2 weeks. The call ended, but Sarah sat frozen. The phone still pressed to her ear long after the line went dead. A trust changes, official notice. She thought again of that folder. The papers Linda had hidden away so quickly. The strange, satisfied smile on her face right after screaming at Ethan. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Whatever Linda was planning, it had already started. And Sarah realized, with a cold, sinking feeling, that she and Ethan were the ones about to lose everything. The letter never came in 2 weeks like the lawyer's office had promised. It came in 10 days, sitting quietly in the mailbox between a grocery flyer and an electric bill, as if it were nothing important at all. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope in the kitchen. Inside was a single page full of formal legal language she didn't fully understand. Words like beneficiary review and trust restructuring jumped out at her, but there were no real details. Just a notice that changes were under consideration and that a formal meeting would be scheduled at a later date. It told her nothing. And everything. Someone was rewriting the family trust. And somehow she and Ethan were involved. Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, not ready to show David yet. She wasn't sure how he would react, and lately, she wasn't sure she could trust his reaction at all. That weekend, Sarah noticed her phone hadn't buzzed with a single message about Christmas plans. Normally, by early December, the family group chat would be full of arguments about who was hosting, what food to bring, whose kids were allergic to what. This year, there was nothing. She finally worked up the courage to ask Katie directly, "Hey, has anyone talked about Christmas yet?" "I haven't heard anything." Katie's reply came slower than usual. Yeah, actually. It's at Aunt Linda's house again. I thought you knew." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "No, I didn't know. I'm not in the group chat anymore." There was a long pause before Katie responded. "Oh no, I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't realize. I'll ask my mom what happened." An hour later, Katie called instead of texting, her voice low and careful. "Okay, so I asked my mom. Apparently Aunt Linda removed you from the chat weeks ago. She told everyone it was because you never really participated anyway. I'm really sorry. I should have said something sooner." Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, feeling the walls of her own family closing in around her, brick by brick, message by message, decision by decision she was never even told about. "Katie, is David in the chat?" "Yeah, he's in there." Sarah's chest tightened. David had known about Christmas plans. He had known she wasn't included. And he hadn't said anything. That evening, Ethan came home from school looking smaller than usual, his backpack dragging on the ground instead of bouncing on his shoulders the way it normally did. "What happened, buddy?" Sarah asked, kneeling down to his level. Ethan's chin trembled. "Tyler said Grandma told his mom we're not really family." He said it in front of everyone at recess. Some kids laughed. Sarah pulled her son into a tight hug, fighting back her own tears so he wouldn't see how much this hurt her too. "You are my family, Ethan. You are the most important person in my whole world. Do you hear me?" Ethan nodded against her shoulder, but Sarah could feel him shaking slightly. The kind of quiet hurt that doesn't go away just because someone says the right words. That night, after Ethan finally fell asleep, Sarah found herself standing in the hallway closet, staring at David's winter coat hanging on its hook. She wasn't sure why she reached into the pocket. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the same cold feeling that had been growing in her stomach for weeks. Her fingers touched paper. She pulled it out carefully. It was a torn piece of a document, ripped unevenly along one edge, as if it had been separated from something bigger in a hurry. The page had a letterhead from Whitfield and Associates, the same law office that had called her weeks earlier. Her eyes scanned the words. ... Family Trust Amendment, effective as of ... double quotes. The date was smudged, unreadable. Below that, a signature line, and beside it, in careful, familiar handwriting, Linda R. Mitchell. Sarah's hands went cold. This wasn't just about a phone call anymore. This was real. Linda was already changing the trust, and somehow this torn piece of it had ended up in David's coat pocket. Had he known this whole time? Had he seen the full document and said nothing to her, just like he'd said nothing to Linda at Thanksgiving? Sarah heard David's footsteps coming up the stairs and quickly folded the paper, slipping it into her own pocket instead of putting it back. Her heart pounded as he appeared in the hallway, tired from a long day at work. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, noticing her standing there. "Yeah," Sarah said carefully, forcing her voice to stay calm. "Just organizing the closet." David gave her a tired smile and walked past her into the bedroom, completely unaware of what she now held folded in her pocket. Later that night, lying awake beside him, Sarah stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. This was only a fragment, torn and incomplete. She had no idea what the rest of the document said, how much it involved Ethan, or how far Linda's plan had already gone. But one thing was becoming painfully clear. The scream at Thanksgiving, the lies in the group chat, the trust changes. None of it was random. It was all connected, all part of something Linda had been building quietly, patiently. While Sarah had no idea what was happening around her. Sarah closed her eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. She needed to find the rest of that document. She needed to know exactly what Linda was planning before it was too late for her and Ethan to stop it. Sarah didn't sleep much that week. Every night, after Ethan went to bed, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, quietly searching for answers. She read about family trusts, beneficiary changes, and legal notice requirements. None of it made her feel better. If anything, it made the danger feel more real. She kept the torn document hidden in an old shoebox at the top of her closet, tucked beneath a stack of sweaters David never wore. She hadn't told him she had taken it, not yet. She needed to understand more before she said anything. One evening, while searching through old family photos on her phone, Sarah found a name she hadn't thought about in years: Aunt Rosalind, David's aunt from his father's side. Sarah remembered her vaguely from her wedding day. A quiet woman who had left early and never appeared at another family gathering again. No one ever talked about why. Sarah found her number in David's old contacts and, after a long moment of hesitation, decided to call. Hello. The voice on the other end sounded surprised. Aunt Rosalind, it's Sarah, David's wife. There was a pause. Sarah, it's been a long time. Is everything all right? Sarah took a deep breath. Honestly, no. Something happened at Thanksgiving with Linda, and I think she's trying to change the family trust. I found part of a document, and I don't understand what's going on. I was hoping you might know something. The silence on the line stretched longer this time. When Rosalind finally spoke, her voice was quiet and careful. I was wondering when this might happen again. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. Again? What do you mean, again? Linda did this to me too, years ago, Rosalind said. Back when my husband, her brother, was still alive. She never liked that I married into the family instead of being one of them by blood. One year, at a family dinner, she humiliated me in front of everyone over something small, just like she did to your son. Weeks later, I found out she had convinced my husband to cut me out of an inheritance that should have gone to both of us. By the time I understood what was happening, it was already done. Sarah felt sick. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't anyone warn me? I tried, once, Rosalind said softly. No one believed me. Linda is very good at making herself look like the victim. She humiliates people in public, then quietly punishes them where no one can see. By the time you notice the damage, she's already made sure everyone else sees you as the problem. Sarah closed her eyes, the pieces falling into place. The scream at Thanksgiving wasn't just anger. It was the beginning of a pattern Linda had used before. A pattern designed to make Sarah look unstable while Linda quietly took away everything that should have belonged to Ethan. Aunt Rosalind, would you be willing to talk to David? He might believe you. There was a long pause. I can try. But Sarah, be careful. Linda has a way of turning families against the people who speak up. That weekend, Sarah arranged for Rosalind to visit. She hadn't set foot in Sarah and David's home before, but she arrived carrying an old folder of her own. Filled with letters and notes from years earlier, David was confused when he saw his aunt sitting at their kitchen table. Aunt Rosalind, I haven't seen you in years. What's going on? Sarah placed the torn document from the shoebox on the table in front of him. David, I need you to listen. All of it. No interruptions. For the first time in weeks. David actually listened. Rosalind explained everything, her own painful history with Linda. The public humiliation years ago, the quiet trust changes that followed, and the family's refusal to believe her when she tried to speak up. David's face grew pale as he listened, especially when Rosalind described the exact pattern that had just played out with Ethan. Mom did that to you? David asked quietly. She never told me any of this. Of course she didn't, Rosalind said gently. She never tells anyone the parts that make her look cruel. David picked up the torn document with shaking hands, reading the fragment over and over. Where did you find this? In your coat pocket, Sarah admitted. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't know what to think, and I didn't know if you already knew. David shook his head firmly. I didn't know about this specific paper, but I think my mom gave me some folder to hold on to a few weeks ago. She said it was boring paperwork for the house. I didn't even look at it closely. It's probably still in the car. He rushed outside and returned minutes later holding a thick manila folder. The edges slightly torn where the piece Sarah had found used to be attached. He set it down on the table, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside were pages of legal documents, all related to the Mitchell family trust. Sarah felt her heart pound as David flipped through page after page, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something darker. Sarah, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. This isn't just a small change. She's trying to remove Ethan completely from the trust. Our whole branch of the family. Everything meant for us. She's giving it to my brother's kids instead. Sarah felt the room spin slightly. The confirmation of everything she had feared finally laid out in black and white in front of her. David looked up at her. His eyes filled with a mix of guilt and anger. I should have listened to you sooner. I should have stood up for Ethan that night. He took a deep breath. I'll help you fix this. Whatever it takes. Rosalind reached across the table and placed a gentle hand on Sarah's arm. Just be careful, both of you. If you're going to confront Linda about this, you need solid proof, and you need to be ready for her to fight back harder than you expect. David nodded slowly, closing the folder with a firm hand. Then we get the rest of the proof, all of it. And this time, my mother isn't going to control how this story ends. Sarah looked at her husband, seeing a spark of the man she had married finally returning to his eyes. But even as hope grew in her chest, a small, nervous voice in the back of her mind reminded her Linda had done this before and gotten away with it. This time had to be different. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah and David worked quietly, piecing together the full truth. David requested copies of the trust documents directly from Whitfield and Associates, using his legal right as a named beneficiary. Rosalind helped connect them with an old family friend, a retired lawyer named Mr. Hendricks, who agreed to review everything and explain what it truly meant. What they found confirmed their worst fears. Linda had begun the paperwork to amend the family trust nearly 2 months before Thanksgiving. The amendment would remove David's branch of the family completely, redirecting everything: the family business shares, the properties, the inheritance meant for Ethan to David's brother, Michael, and his children instead. The timing was carefully planned. Mr. Hendricks pointed to a specific clause. She needed a reason the family would accept without asking too many questions. Something that would make it look like Sarah and Ethan simply didn't belong. A public incident right before the paperwork was finalized would do exactly that. Sarah felt a chill run through her. The scream at Thanksgiving hadn't been about a spilled gravy boat at all. Ethan had simply given Linda the opportunity she had already been planning to use. She would have found another reason if this one hadn't happened, Rosalind said quietly. She always does. David clenched his jaw, staring at the paperwork with a mix of grief and anger. My own mother used my son to justify stealing his future. We need to tell Michael, Sarah said suddenly. He deserves to know too. This isn't just happening to us. It's happening behind his back as well. David hesitated. Michael's always been Mom's favorite. He might not believe us. We have proof now, Sarah reminded him gently. Real proof. Let's give him the chance to see the truth for himself. The following weekend, the extended Mitchell family gathered for an early holiday dinner at Linda's house, the same dining room where everything had started weeks earlier. Sarah walked in holding Ethan's hand, feeling stronger than she had in a long time. David walked beside her, carrying a folder of his own. Linda greeted them at the door with practiced warmth. David, Sarah, so glad you could make it this year. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Ethan, cold and unreadable, before shifting back to a polite smile. Dinner began normally enough, filled with quiet conversation and careful smiles. But as dessert was served, David stood up from the table, his voice steady. Before we finish tonight, there's something the family needs to know. Linda's smile faltered slightly. David, is this really the time? It's exactly the time, David said firmly. He opened the folder and placed several documents on the table where everyone could see. This is the amended family trust, the one Mom has been working on for the past 2 months. It removes my family completely, Sarah and Ethan, and redirects everything to Michael's side instead. Gasps rippled around the table. Michael, sitting near the end, leaned forward, confusion written across his face. Mom, what is he talking about? Linda's expression hardened. David, this is not the place to discuss private financial matters that became public the moment you humiliated my son in front of this entire family and used it as your excuse, David said, his voice rising with a confidence Sarah hadn't heard in years. You screamed at an 8-year-old for spilling gravy, and weeks later, you used that same incident to justify erasing him from this family's future. That's not private. That's cruel. Michael's face paled as he reached for the documents, flipping through the pages himself. Mom, is this true? You were going to give me everything without even telling me you were taking it from David and Ethan. Linda's composure cracked for the first time. Michael, I was going to explain everything eventually. I just wanted to protect the family's assets from ... instability. Sarah finally spoke, her voice trembling but clear. My son is 8 years old. He spilled gravy at dinner. That's not instability. That's a child having an accident. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the family members who usually avoided conflict were now staring directly at Linda, waiting for an explanation that wasn't coming. That's when the doorbell rang. Linda's face went white as she recognized the man standing at the door moments later, Mr. Hendricks. Accompanied by a young associate carrying a briefcase, Linda, Mr. Hendricks said calmly, stepping into the dining room. I apologize for the interruption, but David asked me to bring the original, notarized version of the trust amendment, along with the earlier trust documents for comparison. I believe the family deserves to see exactly what has changed. And when Linda's hands trembled as Mr. Hendricks laid the documents on the table beside David's copies, the dates, the signatures, the careful timeline, everything matched perfectly with what David and Sarah had already discovered. You started this before Thanksgiving, Michael said slowly, staring at his mother in disbelief. The gravy boat, the yelling, all of it happened after you had already decided to cut them out. You just needed an excuse. Linda opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. For the first time in the story, the woman who controlled every conversation, every family decision, every carefully placed comment, had nothing left to say. Sarah looked around the table at the shocked faces of relatives who had once believed Linda's version of events without question. She looked at Ethan, sitting quietly beside her, finally seeing the truth being spoken out loud instead of hidden behind silence. For the first time since Thanksgiving, Sarah felt the weight on her chest begin to lift, but as she watched Linda's expression shift from shock to something colder, more calculating, Sarah knew this wasn't over yet. Linda had spent years building her control over this family. She wasn't going to let it go without one final fight. Linda stood at the head of the table, her hands gripping the back of her chair. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her, waiting to see what she would say next. I built this family's wealth, she finally said, her voice tight. I have every right to decide how it's protected. Protected from what? Michael asked, still holding the documents, his voice sharp with hurt. From your own grandson. He's a child, Mom. He made a mistake with a gravy boat. That's it. You don't understand the pressure of holding this family together, Linda snapped, though her voice cracked slightly at the edges. Everyone expects me to make the right decisions. I couldn't risk. Risk what? Sarah interrupted, standing up slowly. Her voice was calm now, steady in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Risk that your grandson might grow up feeling loved and included. Risk that I might not be the outsider you always wanted me to be. Linda's eyes met Sarah's, and for the first time, something shifted behind them. Not quite regret, but something close to it. Aunt Rosalind, who had been sitting quietly near the back of the room, finally spoke up. "You did this to me too, Linda, years ago. I never told anyone the full story because I didn't think they'd believe me. But it's time this family finally understands the pattern." Linda's face lost what little color remained. "Rosalind, that was different. It was exactly the same," Rosalind said firmly. A public humiliation followed by quiet paperwork nobody was supposed to notice. "You've done this before, and you would have done it again to someone else if David and Sarah hadn't found the proof this time." The room stayed silent for a long moment. Michael set the documents down carefully, looking at his mother with an expression Sarah had never seen on his face before, disappointment, mixed with something like grief. "I won't accept this trust the way it's written," Michael said quietly. "Not like this. Not built on lies and a little boy's tears." Linda's shoulders sagged, the fight slowly draining out of her. She looked around the table at the faces staring back at her, faces that no longer held the same blind trust they once had. Mr. Hendricks cleared his throat gently. "Linda, given tonight's revelations and the family's clear wishes, I'd strongly recommend reversing the amendment and restoring the original trust terms, treating all grandchildren equally. Continuing forward with the current version would likely lead to a legal challenge, and frankly, a very public one." Linda was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than Sarah had ever heard it. "Fine, reverse it. Put it back the way it was." It wasn't a full apology, not yet, but it was the first crack in a wall Linda had spent years building. Over the following weeks, the family slowly began to heal, though not without effort. Michael reached out to Sarah directly, apologizing for years of standing quietly by while his mother pushed her aside. Katie helped rebuild the family group chat, this time making sure Sarah was included from the very beginning. David changed too. He began speaking up more, standing beside Sarah in ways he hadn't before. Finally understanding that protecting his family sometimes meant disappointing his mother. As for Linda, the change came slowly and quietly. A few weeks after the confrontation, she showed up at Sarah and David's front door, alone, without warning. Sarah almost didn't answer, but something made her open the door anyway. Linda stood there, looking smaller somehow than she had at that dinner table. "May I speak with Ethan?" she asked quietly. "And with you, if you'll let me." Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing her in. Ethan came into the living room cautiously, standing close to Sarah's side. Linda knelt down slowly, meeting him at eye level, something she had never done before. "Ethan, I owe you an apology," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I was wrong to yell at you the way I did. It wasn't about the gravy boat. It was about my own fear of losing control, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair, and I'm truly sorry." Ethan looked at his grandmother carefully, then glanced up at Sarah, as if checking whether it was safe to believe her. Sarah gave him a small, encouraging nod. "It's okay, Grandma," Ethan said quietly. "Just don't scream like that again, okay?" Linda's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "I promise." She stood and turned to Sarah, her voice quieter now, stripped of its usual sharp edges. "I've spent so many years afraid that if I wasn't in control, everything would fall apart. I didn't realize how much damage that fear caused until I saw it happening to my own grandson. I can't undo everything, but I'd like to try to do better." Sarah studied her for a long moment. She didn't fully forgive her, not yet, maybe not for a long time. But she recognized the smallest beginning of understanding. And that was enough to start with. "We'll take it one step at a time," Sarah said simply the following year. Thanksgiving returned to the Mitchell family home. This time, the table felt different. Warmer, somehow, despite the same golden chandelier and the same rich smell of turkey and fresh bread filling the air. Ethan sat proudly near the head of the table, carefully holding the old silver gravy boat with both hands as Linda guided him gently, showing him how to pour it without spilling. "There you go," Linda said softly, a genuine smile on her face. "You've got it." Sarah watched from across the table, catching David's eye. He reached over and squeezed her hand under the table, a silent reminder of everything they had fought through together. The gravy boat made it safely around the table that year, without a single drop spilled. But even if it hadn't, Sarah knew now that one small accident would never again be enough to tear her family apart. They had faced the truth, stood their ground, and come out the other side stronger, together, and finally truly home.